It's really hard for me to believe, but it has been 10 years, over 10 years, since I posted my very first YouTube video here on this channel. And for weeks, I've been trying to think of a thank you video, and every time I start to put together an outline or think about what I'm gonna say, it's just kind of a boring video. I want to do something fun. I want to shake it up a little bit, and I thought, you know what? Let's go back to my very first review, which happened in June of 2014. It was the Surface Pro 3. Very first thing I ever reviewed on the internet. So the modern day Brad is gonna watch the Brad of 10 years ago and cringe on camera in real time. You know, when I say it out loud like that, it doesn't sound like such a good idea. Oh well, too late, let's do it. All right, so here I am on my YouTube page, and I'm gonna sort videos by oldest here. And I should point out, first of all, the first few videos I did were about the history of the internet. I was a web designer. I was trying to think of things to do. I was a big fan of the Vlog Brothers and what they were doing with their Crash Course channel early on. And I thought, hey, I can do that. I was wrong. I couldn't do that, but it led me to some other things and just generally posting about what I was thinking about at the time. Most of these videos went on my blog, and then like website design clients would read my blog and say, oh yeah, he knows about responsive web design or Firefox or whatever, and they might hire me for a job. I really didn't think of YouTube as its own platform at the time until this video took off, and that video is this review of the Surface Pro 3 as a replacement for a Wacom Cintiq. Quick shout out, I've got 2 courses, Learn to Draw in 60 Days and Intro to Digital Art over at bradsartschool.com. Check those out if you're just jumping into digital art or wanting to learn more about drawing. Back to the video. So first off, before I hit play, I just want to say that the video is in 720p, so when you blow it up to 4K, it's gonna look gross, but that's all right. We're gonna roll with it. Let's hit play.
I got a new toy this weekend. It is the Microsoft Surface Pro 3, and I'm gonna try my best to review it. Now, I'm not gonna be talking about it from the point of view of specs and all the little stuff that everybody else talks about. I'm gonna be looking at this from the point of view of an illustrator who's trying to replace his Wacom tablet. I've really been looking for a portable drawing tablet ever since the iPad first came out. I've used the iPad for...
Now that's totally true. Some background on this, I wanted to draw like mobily. At the time, Wacom tablets were tethered with huge power bricks, and they were really thick and they were heavy. It was hard to transport. I was doing graphic design, web design, and I was working on site with clients, and so I couldn't do any illustration there. Yet I wanted to do more of that kind of design work that required a pen and a tablet. I couldn't take it with me. And so a friend of mine showed me his Surface Pro 2, and I had used it, and I decided, okay, I want one, but he told me the 3 was coming out and to just wait a few weeks. That's why I picked this up.
For illustration before, but I can't get the kind of accuracy, even with the dozens of styluses that I've tried and played around with.
That's true too. The styluses back then were just junk. This was before the Apple Pencil.
So, a little background. My current setup is a Wacom Cintiq. It's a 12-incher. I got it in 2008, so I've been using it for 6 years. It has been my primary drawing tablet. I'm using it on a Mac, and I'm usually mostly Photoshop and Illustrator. So, I'll start with the hardware. First of all, the tablet itself.
This is my idea of product shots back in the day, is taking the thing, flipping it really fast. I had no idea people were going to actually watch this, but here we go.
It's pretty lightweight. There are holes in it that you can stick things in.
Holes you can stick things in.
Honestly, there's a lot of people who have reviewed it and have said a lot of cool things about it. I mean, as far as the hardware goes, it's pretty good. And it comes with this guy, the stylus. They call it a pen. I really like it. It's solid. It feels good. There's a quadruple A battery in here. That kind of weights down the middle of the pen, and there's some smaller batteries in the back, so it really feels well weighted. It's not like the back is too heavy from the front.
It was a decent
it draws really well. I'm also under the understanding that the nibs can be replaced in this as well, which is another thing that you can do with Wacom tablet pens that really comes in handy. Now, the pressure sensitivity in this is lower than my Wacom tablet. My current Wacom tablet's pressure sensitivity, I think, is 1024, which works great for what I'm doing. This is dramatically lower. It's 256.
256.
But while drawing with it,
now, something this is kind of interesting is nowadays we're at like 16,000 levels of pressure sensitivity. Back then, when you went from like 1,000 levels of pressure to 2,000 levels of pressure, that number mattered. Once you got over 2,000 up to 4,000, it didn't matter so much anymore. But that was one of the main things that drawing tablets were like graded on. And this stylus didn't have that much pressure in the scheme of things, yet I was kind of surprised at how well it worked. Anyway, I'll keep going.
Notice any discernible difference. It actually works pretty well. The tablet itself is 12 inches, which is kind of about the size of a normal laptop screen, not a normal tablet screen. So it's a little bit larger, but it works extraordinarily well for drawing on.
It's surprising how little the Surface Pro has changed in 10 years.
Really gives you room for your tools to sit and gives you a lot of drawing room. My 12-inch Wacom has a much lower resolution on it, and it feels like more recent versions of Photoshop's most of the tools take up half of the screen, and there's a very small.
It was really hard to draw on smaller.
So the extra space is really, really nice. There's also this kickstand on the back, which is really nice, which pops out pretty easily, but then if you really pull, it's double hinged like a serpent's jaw or Uncle Joe's thumbs, and so you can get it into a really nice position for sitting on a table and drawing on. I would be careful closing it though, however, because once you get it to this point, it snaps pretty quick, and I'll pinch my hand a couple times with that. I also got one of these guys. This is the type cover. Type cover just snaps right into place, just like that. It goes over the thing.
You know, I'm impressed by how confident I am in this thing. I thought I would be cringing more. I held my own.
Collecting dust and schmutz, and I have a feeling that 6 months from now, this thing is going to look really nasty on the outside.
Yeah, the Surface Pro covers do get nasty.
And it actually kind of is laptop-esque. Is kind of nice and pretty cool. Now, for most people, this type cover is going to be really nice and really useful. For me, it felt when I was putting it on the desk, I had to reach over it to draw, and my palm and arm were always kind of, I could never quite get comfortable on it.
That was the big thing. It still is.
Same thing when I was sitting on the couch drawing with it. There was just no comfortable way to get this thing on my lap.
Photoshop and so many of the apps at the time were based off of just using shortcut keys.
One workaround I found is I ended up taking my old Apple keyboard, this guy, and I used, it's a Bluetooth keyboard, so I ended up pairing it with the tablet itself, and that worked really well because I could move that around and put it wherever I needed to put it, and I think it's actually cheaper to buy one of those than it is to buy a cover. I also ended up connecting my mouse to it because as much as I thought I'd be able to get away without one with just using the stylus or touch or the little keypad on it, it just,
can I rewind quick? I want to show something to you guys. Let me see if I can find that screen. Take me to where I was. There it is. Okay, so this is the weirdest thing about the Surface is that it had that Windows logo right there is like a button that you can touch. And on the screen, there was also right next to it a button that you could touch. That was a start button. Both of those were start buttons. It was a weird design.
Be able to get away without one with just using the stylus or touch or the little keypad on it. I needed that precision. All right, on to the fun stuff. Next, we're going to talk about drawing. How does it work? How does it feel? Okay, first I got to talk about Photoshop and my experiences drawing in that, and I was actually really impressed. I do a lot of my sketch work up front in Photoshop, and then I move it into Illustrator to do the finishing work. So that's how I started sketching.
Back then, I wasn't willing to pay for Bandicam to take off the little ghost mark on there.
All the interface elements, because you have this high density screen with a lot of pixels across it, it was very, very hard to hit some of the controls and getting layers to turn on and off.
Back then you couldn't change the percentage on Windows. Back on Windows 8.
It was very hard to hit those very small touch areas. Now fortunately, early on I found in the preferences something called experimental settings, which made me a little nervous, but it turns out it's kind of awesome. One of them is to double the size of the interface elements.
So in Photoshop you could double the size of the interface. That's right.
Everything was easier to hit. I could actually hit things with my finger.
The resolution of the screen at the time was so high density compared to everything else out there. Nowadays it's kind of normal.
I quickly got comfortable with tools and using it kind of two-handedly. I did miss the keyboard. I know Photoshop shortcuts like the back of my hand is built into my muscle memory, and so hitting Command Z or deleting something or wiping something out, all that stuff I have kind of programmed into me, and since you're dealing with just a tablet, if a keyboard is not attached to it, you lose a ton of functionality that you just don't think about otherwise.
So that's what I was talking about before.
Apple keyboard really helped.
Everything was built for shortcuts. Nowadays, there's on-screen stuff. There's a lot of stuff you can use to get around that.
Touch controls, and I really, really liked this a lot. One of them was being able to pinch and zoom, since it was hard to kind of zoom out without a keyboard. The
pinching and zooming compared to an iPad, though, looking at that now, it's so clunky.
That was fantastic. Another thing that the touch controls let you do is the ability to take two fingers and spin it and actually spin your canvas. Now back when I'm using my Wacom, I turn it around a lot so I can get the right angle, just so I can get something just right. But this way I can actually change my canvas instead of the position of the tablet to something awkward. Now I read some reviews that said that it was kind of laggy when they were using their their new Surface 3. I didn't experience that lag sometimes when I was pinching and zooming a little bit, but when I was drawing, I thought it was pretty snappy.
I probably would.
Then there was Adobe Illustrator. As good as Photoshop was
Adobe
as
Illustrator.
disappointing as Illustrator was. A lot of what I do in Illustrator is I draw my lines and then I redraw over those lines, and it's nice because you can kind of edit
Illustrator
as you
a
go.
lot.
And then I'll go in with the I'll hold Control, get the little white arrow, and I'll actually change some of the angles and arcs and perfect those strokes. And what I found was that when I went to do that, it was incredibly hard to grab those little 1 or 2 pixel wide little dots, specks on that screen.
It was impossible to use Illustrator at the time, and I begged Adobe just to make the hit points bigger, and they had this plan
so when I was using
to build
Illustrator,
their own
I came up with this
version
setup
of
where
a
I had
touch
my
system
keyboard
in
kind of off to
Illustrator.
the side, and
I don't know if touch mode is still in there or not. It might be. It took years to actually get bigger touch points in Illustrator.
Sort of thing, and over time I kind of got a process together that worked pretty well, and I got some nice stuff out of it. On the other hand, when I tried drawing on the couch while I was watching TV with my wife, it just didn't work. I needed the keyboard, I needed the mouse. Illustrator doesn't work on the fly. And then there was the ever important switch between being used to using a Mac and then switching over to a PC. I love me some keyboard shortcuts, which is why I can't tell you how many times I went and I hit Command and then C or P or whatever.
I don't think I'd put this in my videos now. You just kind of get used to different operating systems, and it's not really worth talking about.
Oh, it's infuriating. I get it, that's kind of on me. So what I did is I went out and I downloaded this cheapo little keyboard mapper doodad thing.
Oh, I
PC,
remember this.
And I changed the Windows buttons over to
I was pretty resourceful back then.
Button. And after that, my workflow.
I wish I used more
B-roll.
Like, that's the thing. It's like, show us the keyboard mapper. And I bet if we looked at the comments,
and I was throwing him back to the home
screen. Oh, here's the double button thing.
I think it was similar to that, except I didn't have that problem. My hand never landed there, so I never really felt the haptic touch. Haptic feedback is just a ridiculously fancy way of saying it shakes when you touch it. So if you're thinking about switching over, here's a couple things that you should just be aware of. One, the surface is pure glass. It's smooth, and it's beautiful, and it's shiny. The Wacom that I was using, and I think a lot of their products are kind of like slightly textured, almost to the point where you don't notice them. It's kind of like drawing on a really smooth vellum, so there's some resistance to that pen, but just a tiny bit. On a glass surface, there's none of that. It's slippery, it's smooth, and there were several
I'm amazed at how much of the stuff that I still talk about today, I was talking about it 10 years ago.
Whenever the surface is off for an extended period of time, it unpairs my drawing pen.
Oh, yeah,
the drawing pen still works when you come back, but it's not nearly as responsive, and you don't get all the features. So I found myself 4 or 5 times during the day going to control panels, turning off the pen and repairing the pen, which takes all of about 2 minutes to do, but still annoying. So now I know whenever I turn the thing on, I'm supposed to repair the pen. Another thing is this
so
little
many
pen has some buttons
in those
on it,
early
and it'd be
versions
really
of the
useful
Surface
to be
have
able
been
to map those
smoothed over.
buttons and actually put like Control on there or the space bar on there or something like that. But right now, there's no way to do that. I'm hoping over time there are some drivers that let me customize this. I was also really impressed by the battery life in the thing. I watched 3 hours of TV with my wife. We binge watched Orange is the New Black, and during that time, my battery got down to like 40%. So I'm thinking this thing probably is going to last you 4 or 5 hours if you're just drawing.
I'm surprised.
So to wrap up, I'm going to keep the thing. I'm not going to return it. I think it's kind of like driving somebody else's car. It's going to take you where you need to go, but it's going to take a little while and adjusting to get used to. So if Photoshop is your primary tool, you're solid, you're good to go. If Illustrator is your major tool and that's what you want it for, maybe you should pass. Of course, most of these problems are actually software problems. They're not problems with the hardware itself, so I'm hoping over time Adobe and Microsoft can address some of them, and this can become a better and better...
I don't think I talked about pen wobble in this video. That's over. Cancel. I'm curious. I'm just going to scroll down. Let's take a look at what some of the comments are. Best review, man. I'm looking for a straightforward review like this. I'm blown away by just how clear and concise this review was. Dang. 2019 Brett sent me here. This is the exact kind of review I was expecting. I'm surprised at how many of these comments are pretty positive. You know, I think the comments that stick with you, especially early on YouTube, are not necessarily the positive ones. I remember so many comments on my early videos, and you could see it here. I shot like this much B-roll. Nowadays, my videos are like 80% of the product and maybe 20% talking head. Back then, it was the other way around. If that. Overall, I'm impressed with my review here. I thought I would be cringing a heck of a lot more than I was. I that was watchable. I'm not mad. If anything, the quality of my videos has gone backwards in the last 10 years. One thing I didn't talk about in this review that I'm sure I talked about in the future was pen wobble. And sometimes the pen on the surface, especially with angled lines, is just super wobbly and kind of gross. The reason why it didn't strike me as bad then is because all of the other styluses out there were kind of garbage, with the exception of Wacom. And so comparatively speaking, this wasn't bad. But once you have the selection that we have today of hundreds of styluses to choose from, then you get into that point where you can start to nitpick those little things and start to say, okay, you don't want to get something with wobble because you can get all of these other things that don't have it. With that said, I would not recommend going out and getting a Surface Pro 3 in 2024. It's a little dated. The newer Surfaces are better. They're not running Windows 8. They're running Windows 11. But yeah, that was kind of cool. That was a fun video. What do you guys think? 10 years, man. Whew. That's a lot to think about. That is a lot to think about. Here's to 10 more. I'm not burnt out yet. I'm ready to keep going. So I'll see you here in a couple of days.